Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 8th, 2019 meeting of the East Long Meadow Conservation Commission. Pursuant to Mass General Law, we are recording the minutes of this meeting and LCAT is taping the meeting. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please identify yourself and your organization. Hearing none, moving on to the first item, call of the roll. Craig Jernstrom, Chairman.
Jeff Plazaway, the clerk.
Mary Ellen Goodrow.
Tony Zappuccini.
Robert Sheets.
Next item, a couple of old housekeeping ones. Approval of the minutes for March 13, 2019. I had no issues with those. Entertain a motion for approval.
What was this?
Moved.
March 13th.
March.
Are you Mary Ellen Goodrow?
Yeah.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I have made a few changes that everybody should have seen for the April 10th meeting. Did anybody else have anything to add for that one? Yeah, it's not in our thing here for the meeting, it was just emailed out.
That was a strategic.
Did people see the email with the changes for the April 10th meeting?
When was
The
it emailed?
minutes that I added, there was a couple of votes that weren't on it.
Yeah.
And trying to remember, I added two things that were on there that we voted on that weren't included in the minutes. Or one was included, but it didn't state that we voted. The other item was regarding removing of the posting of not being able to deliver a filing on the day of a meeting. And then we rescinded that. The posting had been taken down off of the town website, and we did vote to approve that, but that one didn't make it into the meeting.
This was a while ago.
April 10th meeting.
But when did you email the
Yeah, what was
update?
the email?
A week or so ago, Bethany?
Yeah, I updated the.
Yeah, I remember, yeah, it was a while ago. The email came out with the amended minutes.
And that's not, we don't have a copy of that here, paper copy, no?
I don't believe we do. We can postpone the vote if you want.
Make a motion.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of April 10th.
April 10th.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
All those, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Old business. The first item on our agenda is 53 Tanglewood, the review of the restoration plan for the Wetlands Protection Act enforcement order for 53 Tanglewood Drive.
Good
Good
evening,
evening.
everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see almost everybody again.
Yeah.
see ya. Yeah.
So what I have here is the additional filing fee. I have copies of the last report that was just submitted, or letter. There's 4 of them, and then I also have 3 additional copies of the plan as you requested. And if anybody needs a copy of the original letter and submission, I also have that as well.
We did conduct a site visit there last Saturday, right? Saturday morning?
Yes.
No, it wasn't bad out Saturday. One of the things that I would say that we accomplished is we were down there, we did do some soil samples, and, you know, I think, as far as I was concerned, I agreed with the delineation of the wetland. But moving forward, we still have a few issues here. And I guess we should just go through your email from yesterday. That the length of the easterly retaining wall would be reduced by 12 feet, would be item A. And that would be, you had in here also that that was exempt from the act because it was a stone wall.
No, it could be a discussion item, but we're considering it to be part of the application. So as you read through it, it is part of the application. So it states, where did I put that? You know, I think it's questionable because it's more acting as a retaining wall. There's no nooks and crannies as you would in a stone wall. So for that reason, it's part of the application, it's part of the calculation, and it's not omitted as an exempt activity unless you felt that that was appropriate.
Yeah, I would have a concern that precast concrete blocks are not stone walls.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
Yeah. And one of the other ones, I guess, was in regards to the plantings that are shown on the drawing. Where you're showing 18 to 24 inches, is that the height?
Correct.
I guess I would say I have some very big concerns about, we're trying to replace canopy. You know, I think I would be looking for something that's at least 12 to 16 feet high, as opposed to a 2-foot high tree.
Okay.
One of the other concerns that I had about this too was the shed and the proximity to the wetland. The wetland and the fact that this is in riverfront. And if we look at some of the old drawings, there were trees where that shed was. And some of the old aerial photos. Do we have some of the photos? The older ones?
I actually
that we have?
attached one right to here that shows that you had a grass patch in that back area, and when you looked on Google Earth and you looked back along from the roadway there, you could tell that there was a slope that went down. Because if there was trees in that location where they're looking to put the shed, you know, there is a canopy cover there. So if you look at my inner riparian zone 2015 aerial that came from Google Earth, you can see that kind of grass patch that's there where the shed would be proposed. And there's a door that comes in and out of the basement there, so I can't see that being heavily forested and having them constructed this house with intentions of an egress and access in that location.
But
Yeah, it looked like it was
We have those.
canopied there.
photos from 2012.
What is this Google Earth?
This was 2015. And then the other one is 2018, showing what's there now. So there was a canopy from the trees that were in the front yard that was hanging over, but I don't believe, from looking out there, I don't see any evidence of a big root ball that was pulled up or anything like that. Anything that's within those two retaining walls, I do not believe had a tree of any sort growing there. And you could, the owner could attest to that.
Right,
Doesn't appear to me.
no,
No.
right
no
here.
trees. On the slope, yeah, there was a couple of trees on the slope that were coming down, but nothing can,
So you can see.
I took it out, so I know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, more up towards the front.
Exactly.
Yes.
So the hard part with this is that we're trying to go back. Thankfully, we have Big Brother to help us know what was there. But otherwise, you know, we're relying on Big Brother to make these assertions about what was there and what wasn't there. And I think we're getting as close as we possibly can with the information that we have. And I think the overall goal is to set things right and not to pick on the fine details that we can't even go back and really
These were the
have 100% knowledge of, because it's been altered.
I told you guys many times, you know, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, you know, and I wanna fix it as soon as possible, I got a mess, you know?
We understand that, yeah. But, you know, it's definitely evident that, you know, in 2012, there was a lot more trees there. Granted, you didn't take them down, but this was work that was done without proper permitting and that sort of thing, and unfortunately, you're kind of liable for it. When you cut these trees down, were the stumps removed?
Yes,
They were.
they were,
Round up.
They used a stump grinder? All right.
I had somebody grind it up.
Because obviously one of the first things that I think we need to see is all of this, I'm gonna call it dirty fill, that all needs to be removed.
No problem.
And so then we can inspect it again from where it used to be.
And what's the reasoning for removing the dirty fill when you can see evidence that there is no fill within the BVW from standing in the BVW and taking soil samples?
The fill is in the buffer zone.
Correct.
It's in the riverfront buffer and it's full of contaminants.
So you're making that assertion, do you have evidence of that? In
Well-
terms of contaminants, like what kind of contaminants we're
Well,
working with?
Like, for example, there's broken glass in there. I've seen,
Asphalt.
there's
Plastic
pieces
water
of
bottles.
asphalt, there's plastic, there's tarp, there's fabric, there's, you name it, we've seen it in
There's
there.
a
I just wanna be
big hunk of
careful about
concrete.
saying contaminants, because that's
Yeah,
a
it's
very
not-
dangerous
yeah,
word
that-
to
I
throw
don't think
around.
That's a proper word. but-
Yeah.
It's hard to
Debris.
say what's in
Debris.
there.
I think.
There's debris in
me
there,
Personally, I'd
yes.
be all right if you know, put the wall where it was and maybe excavated 4 to 6 feet past of that demo fill, and then backfilled it with some topsoil. I mean, I don't know what the whims
Yeah,
of
I
the
mean-
rest of the board are.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the regulation is, but there is a regulation saying that you can only use clean fill. You can't use dirty fill.
Yeah, you can't have
That-
contaminated materials
All
moving
that
site to site.
dirty fill needs to go.
We are already planning on regrading at a grandular slope, so you'll be removing
Majority of that.
some of that
Yes.
in that process anyway.
You know, I guess I can understand the concern with having the plastics in there when it's organic debris like bricks and stones and concrete. You know, that to me is not a concern. The inorganic debris that's in there, that would be a reasonable concern, and I understand where you're coming from on that. Now, with pulling it back to try to see what was there prior to, I think that's a little extreme. I think we have enough data available by looking at Google Earth from the street view, from looking at Google Earth throughout the past, 20 years, and looking at what the sites looked like. I don't think we need to go through that type of effort for that reason. If we're concerned about the type of fill, I think that's a reasonable discussion, but when it comes to trying to see what's underneath, I feel very confident that that fill is located in the riverfront area in the buffer zone, but not actually in a wetland resource area like BVW, just the riverfront area.
But it's entirely in the riverfront
Yep.
buffer zone and
No question.
I personally, if that was my house, that's not the kind of fill I would be putting in there. If I'm gonna live there, there's no way I would bring that kind of stuff in to put in.
Yeah, if I'm gonna take it out, I don't care, yeah, let's set it up. I wanna clean my yard, I got a mess for it.
You're already gonna be removing some of
Yes,
it,
that's what
and
I
you're
said,
you're
so
not
we
gonna
don't
grow
have to
grass
argue
on top of
about
the,
it, you know,
you're not gonna
so-
be trying to grow grass on top of some of that stuff
there's going to be toxic
anyway.
applied,
You're
yeah.
gonna have to, clean it up a little.
Yeah, no problem, I take it out, I don't care, you know what I mean, whatever. I
So-
put no clean dirt, just let's set up and let I can clean my yard because it's a mess, you know what I mean, I don't want all the, it's been
Yeah.
6-7 months, so.
So I think if, my feeling I get from Adriano, the owner of the house, is he just wants to make it right. He's really not too concerned about the method means to go forward. He doesn't want his basement full of water. And so if that is the case of removing the materials, obviously there's not a large issue with that. But maybe another option could be is taking out the majority of the materials because with that slope area. And then whatever does remain is gonna have topsoil applied. And if there are inorganic materials exposed, that those all be removed by hand. They can be hand picked because the area that's gonna remain won't be as deep. And I don't think that it's grossly overwhelmed with inorganic materials. I do think that there is, you know, a notable amount. So it may be for consideration, but obviously Adriano's happy to go with whatever.
You know, how does anybody know it's 4 feet down there?
Well, you got a pretty good indication. Typically, that
Yes.
stuff's gone through a grinder, so whatever's on the surface is indicative of what's gonna be there for the majority of the whole thing.
So I guess to clarify, if the commission feels that the entirety of that material needs to be removed and not just a portion of which, Adriano is fine with having that be a condition of approval.
Yes, we do. I'm gonna say yes, we want it, I want it all removed.
I'm with that.
Let's get it done, that's all.
And so you're with your proposal to move the retaining wall back 12 feet, exactly how far away from the wetland is that?
You have to ask that. Easier to do it.
Probably
on,
15 feet.
Maybe more than that. You know, it's at least 12, and then we probably had
3 to 5?
35, yeah. So, you know, 15 to
15
20
to
feet.
18.
Yeah.
So you'd have to look at what the topography of what the land was prior to the construction, the fill, whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Memory serves me that it was kind of like a,
Yeah, I believe the walls,
Well, this is a pretty good picture
Yeah.
to show, it just kind of shows that slope. But when we were there, we did kind of count out, we kind of looked at the
Yes, 3.
land and we counted out what looked like it would work, and then you had said the one beneath would stay, just so you
Yeah, we're gonna,
provided.
we take the two
And I think-
3 blocks,
Seemed
grade it.
reasonable.
And that's detailed in there, and that 3 feet would remain on the base so that we could create the slope.
and, you know, and frankly, I'm not comfortable with a 15 to 20 foot limit of work line there. And I think we're talking about putting the shed 20 feet away.
Well, there's two options for a shed on this property if you were to put a shed in. So, you know, we looked at it, and I detailed this in the discussion in the letter. So this is a tight lot, I mean, it's 0.58 acres, and you have a portion of this which is, I mean, riverfront area, obviously, the entire property is riverfront area.
Correct.
So you can't do anything without being in riverfront area. The second thing is we have the BVW, which is associated with the watercourse. And that watercourse does go behind the property. So if we have to have the shed in the backyard, then that means that the shed has two places to go to try to keep it as far away from the wetland as possible. We can cram it up between the two retaining walls and try to make sure he can get in and out of the door with anything large from his basement. And that's where he'd prefer to have it, because that's where his storage is in the basement, storage would be in the shed, and he could utilize that, and actually not have it be as visible, because it'd be below the grade of those retaining walls. The second option, which Adriano is okay with, but it is gonna require additional soil disturbance, to level out the area that's behind the garage. So that area there, when I was measuring it out from where you can see that the watercourse is, we're gonna be closer to the
Closer.
watercourse.
It's
Yeah.
closer.
We might be
Don't put-
10 feet farther from the BVW, but we're gonna be a lot closer to the watercourse. So in my mind, if a shed were to be acceptable on this property, which it is a residential property that was constructed before the Riverfront Protection Act, then those are the two options, and I see that going with one that doesn't have any additional impacts and also appeases the client's needs or the owner's needs, makes more sense to me.
What size shed are you proposing?
16 by 16, but that could also be modified
Yeah.
accordingly.
And that would have to be, did you already look at the town bylaws for sheds? Because that would be an additional.
I didn't look one at a time, so I can, after, you know, if you guys agree, I can go to the town and,
Okay,
you know what I mean, like,
Because that would have to be an additional step.
Yes,
That's not under our
yes,
purview, but I just
so-
know personally
well,
there
before,
are.
I wanna make sure that you guys approve it before
Yeah, with a building permit.
I get a permit, whatever, you know.
And the materials that would go underneath the shed, the stone, doesn't mean that this is a reason to keep it there, but those are where you see that white restoration area cloud. So those would then be moved not very far to keep that location for the shed. He'd have to take that material and bobcat it around the back of the house to then put that underneath where the shed would be if it was behind the garage. But in both locations, it would be behind the front of the house, which that was what we were discussing at one point, which was the biggest concern for the zoning bylaws.
And just so we're clear, and I get what you're saying about that, but just so we're clear, the house was constructed before the act,
Correct.
but the act applies to everything that happens in that yard now.
Correct.
It's not exempt.
I
No,
know, so, I know,
We didn't say
yes.
that.
Yes, I mean,
And
I
I,
learned my lesson,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
and I think I did provide you with the very first meeting, a
Yeah,
copy
you
of
did, yes, you did,
the original.
yes, you did.
Order
Well,
of
I'm
conditions,
sorry,
yeah,
you know what I mean,
yeah,
like, if I knew, I would not go through this, you know what I mean, I would, so, I'm here to, you know,
Yeah, we
okay,
understand.
to make it clear, and I'm ready to do something bad, you know?
And I guess my overall concern here is, we're supposed to be doing this mitigation to get it back to the way that it was before, and I don't see where we're there. I really don't.
well, I don't think we're gonna get back to the way it was before unless we wait 50 years or we bring in trees that cost more than the house and the property on its own.
Right,
Or do the installation, so we need, I think that, this is a tough review for you folks, because there is no easy answer. It's a tight lot, it's already been completed, we wanna do the best we can do for protecting the resource areas. And my personal experience on going out to any subdivision, and even if it's not a subdivision, is if there's a hole or a low spot next to where people maintain their property, they're gonna put their organic debris into that low spot. Grass clippings, sticks, twigs, whatever it might be. And that's already been happening out here. So the idea of this fence, I think, is really a nice way to take this lot, which is really tight, really close to the resource areas, within the resource area for riverfront area, and create a clear boundary that this is your limit of your residential area, and then this is the limit of the conservation area. And I think we're putting back, or I know we're putting back, a good portion of that where we're gonna let that regrow. We're gonna put in a native seed mix, plant the shrubs and the trees. We can do that to a larger size, and we're fine with that being a condition of approval of, a minimum of 5 foot, or I think you said 12 to 16 foot high for the trees. And we can also vamp up the size of the shrubs if you find that that's necessary. We have some great conservation seed mixes going in, which will create some biodiversity in the area. I think that'll be nice for the slope. And the big thing, with this retaining wall that's here, this house that had tons of water in the basement is not having water in the basement anymore. So to maintain the viability of a structure that was created, and you want to have a financial leg to stand on in town to keep all your structures viable and keep them all, creating a tax revenue, I think that the wall is a necessity to try to maintain this structure where it's located. So I don't see a way around the wall. The trees, I don't know how to put back these trees on a residential property and not have the property go under. So I think, the modification of that and putting in a fence, taking out some materials, installing plantings, taking out any kind of inorganic debris that's been put onto that property, all makes sense, and getting it vegetated as soon as possible. Leaving this open is not the best solution either. And also, having myself be on site during these critical moments, and I outlined that in the last letter, because,
And
that's
we'll
where
be
it can
there
really go
too.
wrong. Yeah,
You know?
and that's great,
East Long Meadow's a small town, we can get around to these places easily.
perfect.
The plantings, is there a specific plan for those? I think
Correct.
references figure 1. I'm not seeing that in what I
Yeah.
have.
Figure 1 is in the most recent handout, so it says on figure 1 revised 5/6/19, originally was submitted 4/17/19.
This one here.
And if you look on the very bottom left-hand corner, there's a planting schedule. And on that planting schedule, we have
Yeah, I
5.
see the schedule.
Yep. So that schedule is the totality of the plantings, and then to be directed by myself as a wetland scientist, where those should be installed once within these, within these areas. So it would be within the restoration areas, which are all shown as cloud areas of different colors.
I guess for me, when I'm asking that, I guess what I'm looking for is if we could see a drawing, site plan drawing, showing this.
Well, I mean, you kind of have that. So these plantings are gonna go within those probably 3 locations. I don't know if the 4th location, that is the orange location, is really gonna need it, because
Something here?
that's just some down twigs and things like that. That's not really too heavy, but it may need something. So I don't want to nail these things down, because this is really a field decision. I think we should nail down the
Yeah,
number.
Absolutely. You got 16 plantings, and you're gonna space them out evenly over the locations. They're not gonna be planted on top of each other. They're gonna firm up the bank, and then within, 3 to 5 years, they'll be flourishing there, given the location. I'm personally good with the plan. If you're gonna even go to the extent of moving all the demo debris, moving that wall back 12 feet, regrading it, putting some topsoil in there with all those plantings. Even given the shed, I mean, a homeowner in East Long Meadow should have the luxury of having a shed in a grassed area. His yard is already limited, it's all riverfront. So I think that, given the lengths he's going to, it's acceptable to me.
I would probably I also would want the trees to be a little bigger. I mean, an 18-inch tree is, I would probably say like, 3 to 5 foot tree.
I think,
A little bigger, because stuff that small sometimes doesn't even make it.
so I mean, we have no issue with that. So I mean, as a condition of approval, you can put in the minimum height of the trees, and if we want to have the shrubs be a little bit more beefy as well, we can do that too. You have a very amenable owner in front of you, who just wants to make it right, wants to make it look good, and have a nice tax revenue come from that property that was, I think it was abandoned when you
Yes.
purchased it. So I mean, we're not going in an entirely perfectly straight direction forwards, but I think in the end, we'll still be moving forwards with this property.
Do you have a date set when you start, if this is approved, the date you're gonna start doing this work?
As soon as possible.
Can you
Well,
notify us?
Excuse me?
Can you notify us when you start, the day you start?
You do 48 hours prior to.
Right, sure. Yeah, that'll be part of the orders of condition.
And then as part of my inspections, it would be an email update to you and your staff after I go out every time. So, and then I'll have photographs there, so if not everybody's able to get out, they can see what's going on. And if you have concerns, this is about working together. I don't think this is a
And
working against each
absolutely.
other.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to Mark Stinson today, and we didn't get into a lot of detail into it. I just did not have time, and he sent some emails out, but,
Yeah, there were duplicates of what he already put in his original comment letter.
yeah. And well,
I'm not
this
sure what he's
was
getting.
new stuff today, and this email that came out from you yesterday, he had some concerns about number 2 and number 3 that you sent.
The compliance with, so he wants everything to be a redevelopment project, because it's easier. I've been on some sites, and there's like a tiny pile of trash in a corner, and that constitutes redevelopment. So, if you guys can think of a way for this small property to be a redevelopment project, I don't think it meets the redevelopment standards, because there's not enough room on this property for us to improve an area that was degraded. I mean, we would have to take some driveway out, we'd have to take part of the house down. I just don't see how we can go and meet the redevelopment standards. And I feel like that's maybe why he resubmitted the redevelopment sheet there. And then the other part of this is calculations. So this property is allowed to be permitted 5,000 square feet of impacts because of when it was constructed within the riverfront area. Permanent impacts. So, you know, you can look at it as a canopy area that was cleared, and I did give you attachments that estimate the canopy area. And no matter how you slice it, we're under 5,000 square feet in terms of our permanent impact, so we meet that provision. And then the next part of this is, you know, if we can't maintain the 100-foot buffer, or 100-foot riverfront area that's vegetated, then we need to kind of go through why that is the case. So originally, this did not have a 100-foot vegetated buffer throughout the entire property. I mean, there's a house in the 100-foot buffer. So with that being said, and then it goes on in the regulations, where you can't provide this 100-foot buffer of vegetation, doing some replication and compensatory storage where required. So we're doing replication work where we can, as best we can on this property. And then also going through and looking at this to understand whether or not having this 100-foot area of vegetation is necessary to protecting the functions and values of this resource area. So this resource area had the vegetation removed in 2016 or 15. So it's been like this for 3 years. And when I go out there, I don't see anything invasive growing in the resource areas. I don't see the watercourse having any kind of water quality issues. And it's not in the state we're gonna leave it in. So in my mind, this property in this location and how it was originally constructed, I don't think maintaining that 100-foot buffer of vegetation is a necessity to maintaining the functions and values of this resource area. I think keeping people out of it for perpetuity is more important than the 100-foot buffer because of how it's located. And that's what the fence will do. So I think we meet the provisions. It's not a pretty way to go about it because we're looking at things from Google Earth trying to come up with all of our numbers, but I did numbers in every way I could think of doing numbers, and every time I came down under 5,000, and I wasn't trying, I was just doing what was there. So I think it's permittable.
And yes, we can allow up to 5,000 square feet of alteration, but we don't have to. You know, we can say, no, you can't do any. But, you know, obviously, we're going to try and work with you here. And it is, one of the things that's in here from the email from Mark Stinson today is, you know, proposed condition site plans. We need to see like a real drawing of this.
Well, I checked.
With the wetlands and all that.
So I checked with the commission and I checked with Mark Stinson prior to starting this process to not waste the client's money and find out what kind of plan was reasonable to be submitted for this application. And both Mark Stinson and speaking with the commission stated that a GPS plan, as we've been presenting to you, with a lot of on-the-ground supervision would be acceptable. So to go back right now after, you know, I went forward and did the check before I even started doing the work would be a little frustrating. It can be done, but
I apologize for that. But.
You know, even talking to Mark, for him to come back and have a different mentality about it, now, you know, after he's already seen one reiteration of it in the past and issued comments, I think we can definitely provide the restoration, protect the resource areas, be on the ground while we're doing this, and I think we can get it done without having to go through the expense of a surveyed plan. And that gives the owner the additional funds to take out all this material, bring in new material, get larger trees, you know, put the money where the resource areas are and not where the paper is. That's my attitude. But
By my estimation, the owner's probably gonna be out 10 to 20,000, which is a pretty hard lesson learned. So I would make a motion that we accept the plan as written with the specifications that it removes all the demo debris, brings the wall back to 12 feet, the shed's all right with me. The 16 plantings, they'll be 3 to 5 feet tall and spaced evenly throughout the areas that are specified on the plan. So I'd like to make that motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Discussion.
Just because I wasn't able to attend, will you, the rest of the board, I'm gonna rely on you guys, will you
I think, I mean, I know I felt like that I really felt that that needed to be more of a gentle slope when we went out there and saw how steep it was, and like I kind of stood down in right at the old,
Old-
ground surface, and
yeah.
it was like,
Yeah.
and so I think we definitely all thought, yeah, you need to regrade that. I think we kind of pictured how far back we were gonna pull that wall, and saw that what we felt comfortable, or I think what I felt comfortable with at least, what was presented to us. So I think from what you presented to us at the site visit and what's here, I think it seemed pretty reasonable to me. I mean, it's not perfect, right? And it's not gonna be perfect, it's not gonna be, but I think it does improve, and in several years, we'll bring it back to, which is maybe, all we can do at this point. I think you have some good points, you can't plant mature, 50, 60-year trees back there again. So, I mean, I felt comfortable when we did the site visit and you went through everything with us. I felt like I got a good picture of what things how they were gonna be improved from the present situation, and I didn't leave there thinking, no, this can't work.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Basically, I understand you're trying to get this done as quickly as possible, and you are being very cooperative with us, but for the most part, I go along with a lot of, what Kate has presented. I just want to make sure that, everything is, that we do the best job that we can the first time and not run into problems later on.
Well, she's gonna be there, so it's just the way you guys want it. She's been doing it for many years, so.
I would say I'm not the least bit comfortable with the motion that's on the floor, with trees at 3 to 5 feet. I know we talked about 12 to 16 feet. In the email that I'm looking at today, as indicated above, the proposed project does not conform to one or more criteria. Therefore, the applicant shall provide riverfront area restoration and/or mitigation as per 310 CMR 10.58 and/or G and H under that. And that's what I'm not seeing here. This, a list of 12 trees and putting in a shed and taking out 12 feet of wall is not satisfactory mitigation to me. I really just don't see it. I don't have a site plan that shows it. These aerial photographs in this, it's just plain not enough for me.
Motion on the table.
Yep. Any other comments?
I mean, I agree with you, Craig, but I also think financially, it was a mistake. I don't want to financially burden a homeowner to a huge extent. I think when I'd like to just be a little reasonable with what we can, I mean, if there's a middle ground somewhere, I'm fine with that. I don't think everybody has to agree with me, but.
I think with what Mary Ellen just said, I think with the savings there, you'll be able to put the 12 to 16 foot trees. And the other trees that you had said 2 to 3 feet, maybe we can go up to 5 feet. Just, double the size, like you said, make them beefier so it'll, hold the ground, the bank.
And if I may comment at this point, if that's okay. So going through these, so for the restoration work going on out there, if we were to try to restore, what would be the option would be to replant a good portion of the lawn, which we're proposing to put fruit trees in a portion of this lawn area. And when you look at the Google aerial view, I'm estimating there's 600 square feet of leaf area that I could see that wasn't maintained where these trees were. And everything else outside that, somebody mowed, mulched, they did something to it, around these trees. So it wasn't like under this canopy was this pristine, natural environment that had all these bugs and, I mean, there's tons of bunnies actually, but, you know, everything else, you know, we're not, while we're looking at that number and what we're looking at is going on, somebody still mowed the lawn underneath all that. So it was only about 600 square feet that wasn't mowed. So when we're talking about restoring it, we're restoring a significant area on the far side of the fence, plus we're putting a barrier in. So that should account for a good portion of the restoration and the mitigation.
How
if
far is
not
the
all of it.
fence from Riverfront?
So the fence will be, it depends in terms of where you're located,
Well,
of
along the
course.
side of the yard, like close to the road.
So along the side of
5
the yard.
feet away.
Oh, no, it's much farther. So if you
We
look at
gotta
the
ask the town for permission, I don't know how far I can put a fence.
let me just pull this up real quick. There you go.
So you're not gonna mow outside of the fence, so that
Correct.
will just be the trees that you plant and
That's it.
any other wild stuff that grows. and-
Alright.
You know, there might be a little bit of weed whacking that happens just on the opposite side of the fence for the first like foot, just to make sure the fence doesn't become overwhelmed with anything, and so that, you know, the integrity is maintained at the fence, you don't want anything pulling it down, vines, things like that. That's generally what we propose when putting in a fence. But let me just see something really quick for you guys here. So if we're talking about that's 12 feet, yeah, in the front yard, I mean, we're looking about 30 feet away from the wetland boundary in some
Oh, in the
locations.
front yard, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as you get to the
That's
backyard.
That's what I thought we
Backyard,
talked about,
yeah.
Yeah,
And then as you get to the backyard, I mean, there was a pre-existing fence line there, and we're just kind of following that. We're not looking to do something and create a new wheel here.
Yeah, I don't have an issue
Yeah.
with that at all.
Yeah. But you said 5 feet. I mean, it's not 5 feet. Maybe in one location it might be 5 feet, but that's about it.
And I guess what I'm concerned in one of the things that was referenced, when an applicant proposes mitigation either on-site or in the riverfront area with the same general area of the river basin, alteration may be allowed notwithstanding the criteria of 310 CMR 10.58, Section 5, C, D, and E, or at a ratio in square feet of at least 2 to 1 of mitigation area of mitigation area to area of alteration. You know, and I just don't see that the mitigation is equal to, even remotely close to equal to, the alteration here.
Are we talking about riverfront area redevelopment standards? Redevelopment
Yes.
within previously developed riverfront area, and we're not a redevelopment project. Because we can't meet those standards, we don't have enough land to meet those standards. So
You're
unless we
saying you're not a redevelop? Yes, you are.
We don't meet, in order to be a redevelopment, sorry, let me look at the regulations specifically. So in order to be a redevelopment project, we need to, at a minimum, proposed work shall result in an improvement over existing conditions of the capacity of riverfront area to protect the interest. I think we're maintaining the interests of the act, I don't think that we're improving it. So I don't think we could improve it, you know, unless I went and we proposed to take the whole front yard and plant it with trees. And even though we're not improving it, we're still maintaining it, and that would be taking the fence out, not having the fence, so on and so forth. So, to be a redevelopment project, you have to meet the standards, and we have to take an area that's, has an issue, you know, like a driveway or a pile of debris that's out there, or an old camper, or whatever it might be, and we need to take that out and improve it. This lot was a house and a yard and some trees and a driveway. Unless the septic system is leaking, which I think you're hooked up to
Yes,
sewer. So I mean, you know, what can you do? So in my opinion, you can maintain the protection to these resource areas. I don't think we can improve it without forcing in the entire property.
I mean, would you wanna maybe add more trees, Craig? What sort of other improvements could we,
No, one of my things is the shed can't go there. And I guess, you know, in my opinion, I guess at this point, what I would like to do, and I know we want to get this done as quickly as possible, I would say, you know, we can go ahead and start removing the fill that is there, but frankly, I haven't enough time to look at it. This application, this new filing from the applicant came in yesterday. I spoke to Mark Stinson about it today. He sent me some things today, but I haven't spent enough time with this as I should. And, you know, in order to make I don't believe I have, in order to make an informed decision here. You know, I'm reading this email from Mark Stinson today for the first time right now.
Yeah, but there's a motion on the table.
I understand that.
So we can go on all night like this,
We can-
really.
We
Or you
can
act
table
on
the,
the
we
motion
can
as
table
the
the
chairman.
motion, or we can vote on it. But I'm not comfortable.
The motion's
With it
been
by
made
any
and
means.
seconded, Craig.
Yes, I understand that.
So-
We're still discussing it.
You are.
Yes.
Do you
I
wanna, do you wanna do it in phases? Phase one would be, let's get in there and take all that debris out, slope the area, and start bringing in the plantings, and we can be there. How's that?
I mean, we could approve it without the shed at this point, and,
Right.
you know,
And they give an alternative location to the shed. So, I mean, if you can't have a shed on the residential property because of the type of property it is, and the commission's not comfortable with that, then that's what it is. But we have two locations that are viable locations to put a shed on a residential property, which most residential properties do have sheds, that would not be impacting the resource area through the use of that shed. But at the same time, if that's a deal breaker, I mean, I'm pretty sure Adriano doesn't need to have a shed. He needs to have his lawn, he needs
Right.
to have, you know, a fence up and have no water in his basement.
Right, at the end of the day, though, it's still a grassed area, a lawn area, and it was a lawn area before,
Correct.
and the shed is going on a lawn area.
The only thing that doesn't make
But
any
the
sense.
grade hasn't changed on, and it is the only place that makes sense to me. I mean, you could put it in the back, stick it in there, and you'd have to change the elevation, because it's all sloped. You'd be closer to the riverfront,
Mhm.
and the motion stands with the shed in it.
I guess I would beg to differ, because I believe the grade has changed where the shed is proposed to be located, where that stone is.
It's
There's been fill
reduced.
put in there.
The grade in that location was reduced so he could get the slope away from the house, so that the water wouldn't run into the basement. That's
Which
how
I don't
the
think
grade
we're gonna
changed.
make them elevate at this point. I mean, you want it to go away from the basement.
So there is still the motion on the floor. We have no amendments to the motion. Under discussion? Any further discussion?
Well, unless you want to amend the motion.
we could amend it to remove the shed at this time from the plan, from the approval in its current location. I mean, I think there's some of this that I think should start, and so I'd at least like to approve parts of this.
So the motion will be amended to move the shed.
The motion's already standing,
Right,
seconded.
but I understand.
Yeah, but he's saying.
But we can take a vote on an amendment to the motion to not include the shed and move the shed location.
So you wanna move the shed location?
I believe that's what Mary Ellen just said, correct?
Or just remove the shed from the approval
Right.
at this
At
time.
this point.
At this point, remove the shed from it and
Yeah,
just,
go ahead, just, let's,
so they
I
can,
can deal with that after.
I wanna see them get that debris out, slope it, and start planting as soon as possible. We'll deal with the shed afterwards.
Well, if I could just interject with that discussion for a moment. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that the height of the trees at 5 to 6 feet may not be what is desired by all members. So I mean, for the tree height, I think maybe raising that could meet some middle ground with the commissioners. And then in terms of the shed, you know, the walls are something that we're permitting under the notice of intent. So the walls are in place. We do have things that could be worked on under the enforcement order. However, to me, it makes sense to give a full approval if you're moving in that direction, under the notice of intent to issue an order of conditions. And if that means that the shed wouldn't be included as part of it, then that could be a condition that the shed is not part of this approval, so on and so forth. But the wall would have to be part of a notice of intent review. It can't be under the enforcement order.
So I'll make an amendment to remove the shed as part of the proposed plan at this time.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Could you restate your motion?
So the motion stands is bring the wall back 12 feet as written with the removal of the demo debris as the additional condition.
Height
Now
of
the shed
trees.
is out, and the height of the trees,
12, what, 12,
no,
16?
we said 3 to 5.
They originally was 18 to 24 inches.
Right, so we said 3 to 5
3 to
feet
5 feet.
on the height of the trees. Evenly spaced.
I think somebody wants 5 to 8.
Make the motion 5 to 8 then. I think we already, the way I stated it was 3 to 5 though.
Correct.
I said
Because
3 to 5
Mary
also.
Ellen Ellen said 3 to 5 and I reiterated that in my motion.
Does anyone care to amend that portion of the motion that's on the floor?
I think that was already voted on and approved.
All we voted on was the shed. We are talking about the height of the trees.
We haven't approved your motion yet.
But-
We approved my amendment.
We
Which
approved,
is part of the whole motion though.
No, it's just an amendment to your
Just an
motion.
amendment.
That's all we approved.
we just took the shed out, that's all.
So if you wanna,
Does anyone care to make a motion to amend the
The
tree height?
I would like to amend it, doesn't have to be every tree, but if we can do like half the trees,
Be specific.
Yeah.
We have 5 trees total, 3 are fruit trees, 2 are red maples.
the red maples. I would like to see them somewhere between 12 and 18 feet tall.
that's, no, you're talking real dollars here. They're gonna grow, but they are gonna grow.
And there already are some growing there
Yeah.
now.
5
How
to,
about 5 to 8?
5 to
5
8
to
feet.
8.
Okay.
So there's a motion on the floor to amend it to 5 to 8 foot height for the trees.
Yes.
The red maples.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And so now we will go back to Tom's original motion. Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor
Oh, his,
Wait a minute.
of the original motion,
as amended.
as amended?
Well, the
Yes.
amendments are already been
Yeah.
approved,
Right,
so.
we're just,
the
we're
original
approving an
motion-
amendment to your motion, that's all.
Right.
So now we're
Aye,
voting on
aye.
the original motion.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay. All righty, good luck.
Well, we'll see you, so
Yes.
you'll know how it's going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you need anything else, let us know.
Thank you.
Very much.
Save them all.
The next item on our agenda is a continued public hearing for the notice of intent for Purv Street. Hi, Bill. Hi, Dan.
Good evening.
Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dan Nitchie, representing Bill LaPlante for Purv Street property. We started this back in the wintertime, discussing it. Wetland delineation of a bordering vegetated wetland on the facility, or partially on the property. Most of it's actually off the property. The proposed plan for this development is to install a retaining wall. Most of it's 25 feet on this eastern corner. We've got 20 feet. Originally we had 15, and we moved that back a little bit. When we were out on the site with the Conservation Commission a couple of weeks ago reviewing the wetland line, we took a good look at that, and there's going to be no trees that are going to be removed from this location, so moving it 20 feet actually helped not take out, there was a large maple right on that corner, so we won't be affecting that tree at all. And for the most part, across this slope, this wall will be at the top of the slope, so all the vegetation on the slope itself going to the wetland will not be touched. You know, there are lots of mature trees out there, a lot of them being pulled down by the Oriental bittersweet that's out there, a lot of them are dying. But here and there, the slope itself protecting the wetland and providing shade to the wetland won't be touched by this project at all. All the mature trees, they're essentially creating the shade to that wetland are on that slope. What's back here is being blocked, that shade is being blocked by the trees on the slope. So that's why we don't believe there's any adverse effect to this wetland by the removal of the trees up here in the buffer zone. And just for the commission's perspective, most of this property, there's a small corner over here that's not in buffer zone, so the entire property is within your jurisdiction. So bordering vegetated wetland, 100-foot buffer zone. The work primarily is installing a wall. We had a long discussion about the wall last time. It's gonna be a 3 to 4 foot high block wall. We're not doing any 10 or 12 foot wall like we discussed last time, because we're up the slope a little higher, we don't need to do a bigger wall. So it'd be a short wall, and then he'll cut the vegetation and just, it doesn't need a lot of grading, but it's gotta be smoothed out a little bit, but that's basically it. And then he'll start marketing the property for use.
So is this wall marked currently?
We didn't mark it
On the property?
We didn't mark it in the field, but we stood there. We said, okay, 25 feet is here, 20 feet is there. And we sort of looked at that location, the 3 or 4 members that were there for that walk. So we looked at where that wall is going to go on the property. I mean, the folks that were there can respond to that, I guess, because they looked at it.
But it's not physically laid out.
Correct.
One of the issues that we have carrying over here is there was a motion made and passed at our previous hearing when this came before the commission a month or so, where the commission voted to have a peer review done to delineate the wetland.
Right. And then we since requested
when
that
we were out there,
rescinded, right?
Yes, when we were out there, Dan had the soil boring tool, and myself, I think it was myself,
Yeah.
Jeff, Tony. I am very comfortable with the delineation as it is shown.
Okay.
And currently, right now, I don't see the requirement for a peer review. But as it stands now, that does still exist.
Right, and it still exists that we're requesting that gets rescinded, correct? Because that's, I think what you're identifying is another motion or another discussion that has to happen
Yes.
beyond this, just a notice of
Mhm.
intent, right?
Yeah. And I would see with this right now, we don't.
You're comfortable with the wetland delineation?
Absolutely. There were soil samples done. Essentially, it's, in a couple spots, it really isn't. I was quite surprised with what I was questioning before, where I was saying that wetland has got to go to where the bank starts going up. And in
This
some
corner right
places,
here,
it doesn't. It's flat, and 3-4 feet away, there's no hydric soil there.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I was questioning. I wasn't comfortable with the peer review because I felt we could do a delineation, especially if we had the soil boring tool, but yeah, you can see that it's just regular brown soil. It's not black hydric soil by any means, even though,
What's the vegetation?
A lot of bittersweet, right?
yeah, there's a lot of bittersweet,
In this
there's a lot of
corner-
skunk cabbage there, and
Yeah, in this
Yeah,
corner, we had a little bit of
Yeah.
skunk cabbage, but we also had Japanese knotweed. So you have an upland and a
Yeah.
wetland plant right next to each other.
And this is an example of, and Dan kind of talked about it with some bank in Long Meadow that actually has it, but it is one of the rarer occurrences where there's actually some skunk cabbage growing, and it's not hydric soil.
Right.
It's just.
Yeah, over in Long Meadow, they have a lot of silt loam, leathervarf clays, and so you get a lot of skunk cabbage that'll grow on those steep dingles. They're escarpments over there, but they're not wetlands, just because they have skunk cabbage. Normally, skunk cabbage means you're gonna be wet up to your ankles or above, that's the normal, but not 100% of the time, especially when you're having 100% wet, upland plant and 100% wetland plant growing in the same location. Something's going on there.
Right.
So, and based on the soils we looked at, there's not enough hydrology to make that a wetland.
That soil's fill, right?
I think this fill here, we found an A and a B,
Yeah.
so it was stratified in a normal structure. I haven't really dug up here much, I'm assuming some of that's fill, but I don't know.
Yeah, there was a house in.
There were houses
Oh,
there.
that's
Basement
right.
probably
That
got
was
rid of
fill
that.
from a million years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the upper section is.
Up here, right?
Right.
Because
has-
there's two
was
driveway
filled
cuts.
probably
Right.
when they did the house and whatnot. When we did the borings down along the wetland, there was no evidence that fill had extended down to the
Right.
wetland, which is you know, evident when you see the steep bank that that was probably not the original steep bank, that was filled years and years ago.
So I will take Craig and Jeff's estimation of wetland line at their word and make a motion, we rescind the peer review for that property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So now we go back to the plan. I definitely like it a lot better, where it was much closer in certain areas from where they moved the wall. And as it's proposed, I really have no issues with the revised proposal. Let's see.
25 feet,
We've got, right here is 20, this corner is 20, the rest is 25. We were 15 originally in that corner, so we gave 5 more feet, that gets it away from the trees.
point out to the board, we've never approved anything that close, and that 25 or 20 feet, how deep are your footings gonna be? They're gonna be, you're building a wall.
We're gonna be in the slope, so it's not, you know, we're gonna be, you know, probably, 18 inches deep on that, and then it's just gonna be a crushed stone
18 inches
into the material, and then it's gonna be a crushed stone
for the
base.
base?
And
So the footing won't go to water table, I think that's where you're going with the question, is are we gonna put it low enough to be
Well,
interrupting?
it's partly
water?
that, and the other part is, in order to execute that, you're gonna need to go further in order to construct this thing.
we've accounted for that with the limit of work.
Right,
The
yeah,
silt
limit of
fence,
works
the
on the
erosion
back side of the
control.
wall, that we're gonna construct everything from this side, and
Will come
because we're not
forward.
going that deep in, we don't need that much work on the outside, on the wetland side of it. Because he's only going a couple of feet in to put the, I'm assuming like a gravel footing,
Right.
right, and then put his blocks on top of that. So we did really think about it, we appreciate your comments last time about trying to reduce our load out here, our work, and try to do a little bit less earthwork than we originally were thinking.
Any other questions or comments from the board? I'll entertain a motion to approve the revised notice of intent submittal.
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
Good
much.
luck, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.